Today we're jumping right into a genuinely bizarre, kind of uncomfortable, but just absolutely fascinating premise. What if humans are literally the most out-of-place species on the entire planet? I mean, think about it for a second. Every single other species on Earth has spent millions of years adapting perfectly to its environment, right? Fish developed gills for the water, birds hollowed out their bones to take to the skies, polar bears grew this incredibly thick insulated fur for the Arctic freeze. They fit, it all makes sense. But then, there's us. Today we're going to look at the very real biological anomalies that make humans look less like native inhabitants of Earth and way more like really awkward guests who just don't quite belong.
Okay, let's dive into this. 80%. That is a massive number. It's the percentage of humans who are going to experience chronic back pain at some point in their lives. And, when 4 out of 5 members of an entire species share the exact same structural problem, you really have to stop blaming individual bad posture and start looking at the blueprint itself. It strongly suggests a species-wide structural flaw. And honestly, this is just the tip of the iceberg when we start looking at how our bodies actually interact with the world around us.
To really see how weird we are, we just need to use some simple analogies and compare ourselves to the animals that are perfectly calibrated for this planet. Take a lizard. A lizard can just sit out there in direct sunlight for hours, totally fine. Dogs, elephants, cats, they spend their entire lives under the exact same sun. But humans? Our sun is literally trying to kill us, to the point where we had to invent a chemical paste, sunscreen, just so we can go outside safely. Or look at childbirth. When a horse gives birth, the whole process takes about 30 minutes, and the foal is literally standing up within the hour. Human childbirth, on the other hand, is famously this violent, highly dangerous ordeal. And getting back to those spines of ours, bipedal animals like kangaroos or ostriches, they stand upright with zero issue because they were built from the ground up for it. Our spines? They basically act like a horizontal bridge that evolution just kind of poorly retrofitted to stand up straight. Gravity just crushes us.
So the human anomalies really pile up fast. We burn in our own sunlight. We have dangerously narrow birth canals, and our backs are just a total mess. But it actually gets weirder. Look at our allergy rate. Roughly 30% of the global population has an immune system that regularly goes to full-on war against completely harmless things. Pollen, peanuts, cat hair. It's a defense system attacking the very air we breathe. And then there's our psychology. We are the only animal walking around with existential dread. We have this full awareness of our own mortality, and we invent entire religions just to cope with the absolute terror of it. And finally, there's our relationship with the environment. Unlike every other animal that exists in this perfectly closed-loop balance with its ecosystem, we act incredibly like an invasive species. We clear-cut, we pollute, we break the natural balance, almost as if we don't really know the rules of the planet, because maybe the rules weren't written for us.
Suspect A, the alien hypothesis.
So, if we don't seem to fit here naturally, how exactly do we explain it? Well, we're going to examine 2 competing scientific frameworks today to figure that out. And before you write this first one off as some crazy sci-fi movie plot, let's look at a very serious academic proposition: directed panspermia. This is the scientific hypothesis that life on Earth didn't spontaneously generate in a primordial soup right here. Instead, the building blocks of life, or maybe even life itself, was deliberately seeded by an intelligent civilization from somewhere else in the galaxy. I know, it's a totally mind-bending theory. It proposes that we are fundamentally disconnected from the absolute origins of the very planet we live on.
Now, to understand how seriously this was taken, look no further than the guy behind this quote, Francis Crick. He won the Nobel Prize in 1962 for co-discovering the structure of DNA. He is literally the man who figured out how the instruction manual of life actually works. And in a 1973 paper, Crick looked at the origins of life on Earth and basically said, you know what? I don't think this adds up. He argued that the timeline of life on Earth is highly suspicious because the mechanism of DNA is just too impossibly complex to have randomly formed from a chemical soup in such a short window of time. That argument right there lends incredible heavyweight credibility to the directed panspermia theory.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the actual hard evidence backing up Crick's skepticism. Let's walk through it. First off, that timeline. Earth is 4.5 billion years old, right? And complex organic chemistry popped up 3.8 billion years ago. In geological time, that is practically overnight. The planet was still a molten hellscape, yet life sparked the literal second conditions allowed it to. Second piece of evidence, the Murchison meteorite. When this space rock crashed into Australia back in 1969, scientists found over 90 different amino acids inside it. Those are the exact building blocks of life, just hitching a ride through space on a rock. And third, we know for a fact that life can actually survive that journey. Just look at tardigrades, those little microscopic water bears. They can survive the vacuum of space, deadly cosmic radiation, freezing temperatures. In 2019, some of them even crash-landed on the moon and might literally still be viable up there right now. So clearly, organic chemistry absolutely can travel between worlds.
Suspect B. Evolutionary mismatch theory.
Now, mainstream biology is definitely not silent on this. In fact, it has a very powerful, totally rational response to all of our bizarre human quirks. And the core of this theory is the concept of evolutionary mismatch. The idea here is actually quite simple. Evolution moves incredibly slowly. We're talking millions of years to iterate. But our environment, our tools, our daily behaviors, those have changed extremely fast. The result is that our bodies are biologically adapted for ancient environments, like the hot African savanna, that essentially just don't exist for modern humans anymore. You can kind of think of it like this. Human biology is basically walking around in a prototype model that just never got its final software update.
Let's pit these two theories head-to-head, using our spine as the ultimate biological battleground. The directed panspermia camp looks at our chronic back pain and suggests, well, maybe we were built for a planet with lower gravity or totally different atmospheric conditions. But evolutionary mismatch looks at that exact same aching spine and says, no, we just only started walking upright about 6 million years ago. And while that sounds absolutely ancient to you and me, in evolutionary terms, 6 million years just isn't enough time to fully iron out all the bugs of standing upright. We're literally just a work in progress.
And this brilliantly illustrates how mismatch theory systematically debunks our weirdest quirks. Just look at this breakdown. Why do we sunburn? Well, our ancestors needed to thermoregulate while running for hours and hours in the hot savanna. Sweating works way better on bare skin, so we essentially traded our protective fur to become the best endurance runners on Earth. Sunburn is just the unfortunate trade-off. What about the sheer dangers of childbirth? Biologists call this the obstetric dilemma. Evolution was trying to make our brains rapidly bigger while simultaneously keeping our pelvis narrow enough for bipedal walking. The pelvis basically got caught in the middle. It's dangerous for sure, but mechanically, it makes total sense. Even our destructive environmental habits are explained here. Our brains are wired for short-term survival in small groups where resources felt completely infinite. We simply lack the evolutionary wiring to intuitively manage a massive, closed-loop global ecosystem. Let's move to and see how this builds into our final section, the lingering doubt.
Because just when it seems like evolutionary mismatch has perfectly tied up the debate in a neat little bow, there is one final unresolved piece of evidence that blows the case wide open again for scientists. And that is the sheer, unbelievable speed of human progress. It is absolutely staggering when you map it out. Look, dolphins have been around for 50 million years. They are highly intelligent, communicative, social, but they have never built a single tool. Chimpanzees figured out how to use sticks maybe 4 million years ago and haven't exactly filed a software upgrade since. And then there are humans. In roughly 2 million years, we went from banging pieces of flint together to splitting the atom, building artificial intelligence, and living on the International Space Station. We went from being literal prey animals on the savannah to landing remote-controlled robots on Mars in what is functionally a geological blink of an eye. Nothing in the 4 billion-year history of this planet has ever accelerated like that.
So the crucial point is trying to explain why. Why did we accelerate so fast? Biologists have actually identified a few potential catalysts. For instance, there was a specific mutation in the FOXP2 gene that may have unlocked complex speech and language. We also discovered cooking, which suddenly unlocked dense, easily digestible calories that allowed our brains to grow massively. And importantly, we developed this unique ability to teach, which meant we could stack knowledge across generations so we didn't have to start from scratch every single time. But while scientists completely agree all of these played a huge role, they also openly admit that even when you combine them, these factors do not fully account for the sheer explosive speed of our ascent compared to every other intelligent species out there.
So, where does that actually leave us? Well, the most honest answer science has right now is simply, we don't fully know. We have some of the puzzle pieces, sure, but definitely not the whole picture. Mismatch theory does an absolutely incredible job of explaining our physical quirks, why our backs ache, why our skin burns, but when it comes to our rapid intellectual explosion, that completely unprecedented technological leap that fundamentally separated us from the rest of the animal kingdom, that remains a genuine, lingering mystery. Modern evolutionary biology can explain parts of it, but absolutely not all of it.
Which brings us to a final thought for today. We are almost certainly a product of this planet, but our constant restlessness, our habit of constantly looking up at the stars, and that deep sense of never quite fitting in, it makes us the strangest thing Earth has ever produced. We burn in our own sunlight, we literally break under our own gravity, and we just can't stop wondering where we came from. it leaves us with a truly memorable, provocative question from our source material. If we are not truly from here, have we just been trying to find our way home for the last 200,000 years? It's a pretty fascinating thought to end on, right?